alien werewolf woman nomad who found me lost in the desert. He had faced death before, in collapsing mines and treacherous mountain passes, but never had it worn such an exotic, unsettling beauty. The cat-like warrior who found him was both his salvation and a new, terrifying mystery, a stark white silhouette against the brutal orange sky. The silhouette resolved into a creature of stark white fur and lean muscle, violet eyes deep as nebulae fixed on him. Primal clothing, woven from desert fibers, clung to her powerful frame, highlighting the dangerous grace of her form. She was a predator assessing. Atlas pushed himself up on a trembling elbow, the grit of Kalen's desert scoring his palm. His throat was a raw cavern. A low growl rumbled in her chest, a sound more animal than human. She carried a crude water skin, its surface worn and patched. She did not offer it. Instead, her head tilted, a silent question in her gaze. "Water," Atlas rasped, his voice a dry whisper. "Please." She crouched, her movements fluid, economical. Her hand, clawed and strong, reached for his canteen, still clipped to his belt. Atlas instinctively flinched, but she was too fast. She unclipped it, tossed it aside without a glance. Then, from her own water skin, she poured a thin stream into his cupped hands. It was barely a mouthful. The liquid hit his tongue like a miracle. He swallowed, a painful, desperate act. It wasn't enough, but it was something. He looked up, his eyes pleading for more. Her growl deepened, a warning this time. She pointed a sharp claw towards the distant, shimmering horizon. Then she pointed at him. Her message was clear: move. Atlas understood. She wasn't offering charity. She had a purpose, and he was part of it. His mind, dulled by dehydration, began to churn. She needed him alive for now. That was enough. He pushed himself to his feet, swaying. The ground felt like a trampoline. Every muscle screamed. "Where?" he managed, the single word a monumental effort. She spun, her white tail, thick and powerful, swishing once. She took 2 steps, then paused, looking back. Her eyes narrowed. If he didn't follow, the unspoken threat was palpable. This was not a request. Atlas stumbled after her, his boots sinking into the fine, red dust. The sun, a brutal orange orb, beat down relentlessly. Each step was a battle. He focused on her retreating back, a beacon of improbable survival in this desolate expanse. He was a geologist, accustomed to harsh environments, but Kalen was different. The air itself felt hostile, the silence absolute. He watched her move, a study in efficiency. Her long, digitigrade legs covered ground with effortless speed, her form barely disturbing the shifting sands. He saw the intricate patterns of scars on her arms, hinting at battles fought and won. She was a warrior, a survivor, utterly alien. A flicker of something beyond fear, a spark of scientific curiosity, ignited in his pain-racked mind. What was she? Where did she come from? She glanced over her shoulder again, her gaze sharp, impatient. He pushed harder, forcing air into his burning lungs. He could not afford to collapse again, not with those violet eyes watching. "I'm Atlas," he said, surprising himself. The word felt hollow in the vast silence. She ignored him, her ears, pointed and tufted, twitching. She continued her relentless pace, leading him towards a jagged line of distant rock formations. They looked like teeth on the horizon, promising no comfort, only more challenge. His legs burned, his vision blurred at the edges. He stumbled, catching himself before he fell completely. Her tail flicked. He felt a surge of indignation. He wasn't a pack animal to be driven. Yet he knew, deep down, he was utterly dependent. He observed the way she scanned the dunes, her head constantly moving, taking in every detail. She knew this desert. He knew rocks. Perhaps, he mused, they each held a fragment of knowledge the other needed. An unwilling partnership, forged in the crucible of Kalen. He tried again. Do you have a name?" She stopped abruptly. Atlas nearly collided with her. She turned, her expression unreadable, then pointed a claw to her chest, a guttural sound escaping her lips. It was a series of clicks and soft growls, impossible to interpret. Then she pointed at him, another questioning sound. He understood. She was asking for his name in return. Atlas, he repeated, tapping his own chest. She mimicked the gesture, then repeated the guttural sound, her eyes fixed on his. It wasn't a question this time, but an instruction. He was to remember her sound. It was her name. A strange warmth, fleeting but real, touched him. This was the first true exchange, a fragile bridge between their species. She resumed walking, her pace still swift, but now he felt a subtle shift. The urgency in her movements remained, but the silent, compelling pressure seemed to ease fractionally. He was still her charge, her unwilling companion, but perhaps also something more. A witness, a tool, a fellow survivor. The desert stretched before them, brutal and indifferent, but he was not entirely alone. The first spark of an alliance, vital and utterly unexpected, had ignited on the scorching sands of Kalen. The journey continued, now with a faint, unspoken understanding between them. Bellatrix maintained her rapid pace, leading Atlas deeper into the labyrinthine rock formations that loomed on the horizon. The sand underfoot grew coarser, giving way to crumbling shale and jagged outcroppings. Atlas, though still exhausted, found a new rhythm, pushing past the pain, driven by the creature ahead. He watched Bellatrix navigate the treacherous terrain. Her lean body moved with a dancer's grace, scaling small ledges, leaping across narrow chasms with effortless power. Her violet eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, missing nothing. Atlas, with his human limitations, had to pick his steps carefully, relying on his mountaineering experience. He saw a loose rock ahead, precariously balanced. "Wait," he rasped, pointing. Bellatrix paused, her ears twitching, then followed his gaze. The rock slid, tumbling down a short incline, kicking up a cloud of dust. She looked at him, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. He had prevented a potential misstep. They pressed on, the silence punctuated only by the wind's howl and their own labored breathing. Atlas tried another sound, a soft, questioning Bellatrix. He hoped that was the correct interpretation of her guttural name. She glanced back, her tail flicking a slow arc. It seemed like an acknowledgement. He felt a small victory. Communication, however rudimentary, was progress. "Where are we going?" he asked, pointing towards the distant, towering peaks that now dominated their view. He knew she wouldn't understand the words, but the gesture was clear. Bellatrix stopped again. She swept her clawed hand across the vast expanse of the desert, then pointed decisively towards the tallest, most remote peak. She then tapped her chest, her earlier gesture for her name, then made a broad upward motion with both hands, a complex alien sign. Atlas struggled to interpret it. Was it a climb, a destination, a purpose? His internal thoughts churned. She needed him for something. His geological background might be useful here. He had spent decades studying rock formations, detecting anomalies, understanding the Earth's language. This planet, Kalen, was alien, but geology had universal principles. They reached the base of the first true rock wall, a sheer face of ancient, wind-sculpted stone. Bellatrix began to ascend with astonishing speed, her claws finding purchase in the smallest cracks. Atlas watched, impressed and daunted. He could climb, but not like that. "Too steep," he called out, gesturing to his own worn boots, then to the smooth rock face. He pointed to a less imposing ridge to the left which offered more handholds. "Easier there." Bellatrix paused her ascent halfway up the wall. She looked at the ridge he indicated, then back at him, her ears swiveled. After a moment she dropped down, landing silently. She moved towards the path he suggested, testing the rock with a claw. She shot him a swift, assessing look before beginning her climb on the easier route. He felt a surge of validation. She was listening. The climb was arduous. Atlas found himself relying on every ounce of his strength and experience. Bellatrix moved ahead, often waiting for him, her violet eyes watching his every move. When he struggled to find a foothold, she would sometimes point with a claw, indicating a hidden ledge or a stronger crack. It was not overt help, more like a silent, guiding presence. He realized she wasn't just observing. She was learning his capabilities, his limitations. and perhaps, he considered, learning to trust his judgment. A fragile thread of partnership began to weave itself between them. As they neared the top of the ridge, the sun began its descent, painting the sky in fiery oranges and deep purples. A chill wind swept through the canyons. Bellatrix found a small, sheltered alcove. She settled down, her body coiled, alert, but seemingly at rest. Atlas collapsed beside her, his muscles screaming. He took a small sip from his meager water supply. He offered the flask to Bellatrix. She sniffed it, then ignored it, turning her head away. He remembered her earlier offer of water had been minimal. Perhaps her own supply was equally scarce, or her needs different. "Cold," he murmured, rubbing his arms. The desert nights were brutal. Bellatrix seemed unfazed. She suddenly extended a claw, raking it lightly across the rock floor. Then she gestured for him to do the same. He looked at her confused, then mimicked her action, scraping a small groove. She then pointed to a pile of loose, flat stones nearby. He understood. She wanted him to build a small windbreak. His geological knowledge came into play. He selected a few larger, flatter rocks, using smaller ones to wedge them into place, creating a low barrier against the wind. It was rudimentary but effective. Bellatrix watched his methodical work. When he finished, she made a soft, rumbling sound in her chest. It was not a growl of aggression, but something else, almost a purr. He felt a moment of warmth, a connection beyond words. He settled against the makeshift wall, pulling his tattered jacket tighter. Bellatrix remained still, her senses tuned to the vast desert night. He saw her ears twitching, her nose occasionally sampling the air. She was a sentinel, protecting them both. He thought about the vastness of Kaelin, the mystery of Bellatrix. Why was she here? What was her purpose? He was a geologist, accustomed to logic and data. She was an enigma, a creature of instinct and raw power, yet possessed of an intelligence that surprised him at every turn. He remembered her earlier gesture, sweeping her hand across the desert, then pointing to the tallest peak. It was not just a destination, but a goal. He had to assume she needed him to find something there, something that required his specific skills. The stars began to pepper the inky blackness above, impossibly bright in the clear desert air. Atlas felt a profound sense of isolation, yet he was not alone. The presence of Bellatrix, despite their vastly different species, offered a strange comfort. He closed his eyes, trusting her silent vigilance. He knew their alliance was still fragile based on necessity, but it was growing. He was no longer just a captive. He was a partner, however unequal, in a shared struggle against Kaelin's unforgiving embrace. He had to survive, not just for himself, but because she seemed to need him. And in that need, he found a renewed purpose. The cold desert night held untold secrets, and he was determined to uncover them, with Bellatrix by his side. A sliver of light pierced the eastern horizon, painting the sky in fiery oranges and deep purples. Atlas stirred, his muscles protesting the hard ground. Bellatrix was already awake, a silent sentinel, her violet eyes fixed on the distant peaks. He pushed himself up, the dry air scratching his throat. She gestured for him to follow, her movements economical. They resumed their climb, the terrain growing steeper, more challenging. Atlas used his knowledge of rock formations, finding footholds and handholds where Bellatrix, with her superior strength and agility, simply leaped. He pointed out a particularly unstable overhang, directing her around it. She acknowledged him with a swift, almost imperceptible nod. Hours passed under the relentless sun. The rock formations shifted, transforming from harsh, angular peaks into smoother, ancient-looking walls. Then, as they rounded a particularly tall spire, the air changed. A subtle coolness touched Atlas's skin, carrying a faint, earthy scent. Bellatrix stopped, her head cocked, listening. She moved forward with renewed purpose, leading him through a narrow crevice. As they emerged, Atlas gasped. Before them lay an oasis, a vibrant splash of green against the desert's stark palette. Palm-like trees, their fronds a deep emerald, clustered around a pool of crystal-clear water. Lush, unfamiliar flora bloomed in riotous colors, humming with unseen life. Bellatrix approached the water, her posture relaxing almost imperceptibly. She knelt, cupping the cool liquid in her hands, drinking deeply. Atlas, his throat aching, followed suit, plunging his face into the refreshing pool. The water tasted sweet, pure. He drank until his thirst was quenched, feeling life flow back into his weary limbs. Bellatrix watched him, her intense gaze softening. She gestured towards a cluster of thick-leafed plants, then back to him. Atlas understood. He was to rest. He found a shaded spot beneath a wide-canopied tree, leaning back against its smooth bark. The sounds of chirping insects and soft rustling leaves filled the silence, a stark contrast to the desert's oppressive quiet. He observed Bellatrix. She moved through the oasis with a quiet grace, her senses alert, but her previous urgency was gone. She seemed at peace here, a part of the vibrant ecosystem. He noticed the way her fur almost seemed to shimmer in the dappled light, reflecting the myriad greens and blues of the oasis. Her ears swiveled, catching every sound. As he rested, his gaze drifted, taking in the details of their sanctuary. Near the edge of the pool, half buried in the rich soil, he saw something glinting. Curiosity overriding his exhaustion, Atlas pushed himself up and walked towards it. He knelt, brushing away the dirt. It was a shard, no bigger than his thumb, of an impossibly smooth, dark material. It caught the light without reflecting it, absorbing it instead, creating a deep, inky sheen. He picked it up. It felt cool and strangely light, yet incredibly dense. The edges were perfectly smooth, not broken or chipped, but as if it had been manufactured this way. There were no visible seams or imperfections. This was no natural rock. His geologist's mind instantly recognized its alien nature. The craftsmanship was beyond anything he had ever encountered. He turned the shard over in his palm. It was a fragment, clearly, of something much larger. Its surface bore faint, almost invisible lines, suggesting circuitry or intricate pathways. A sudden, chilling realization washed over him. This wasn't just ancient Kaelan technology. This was extraterrestrial. He looked at Bellatrix, who was now sitting by the water's edge, seemingly meditating. Her predatory beauty, her advanced intelligence, her unusual physiology. The way she moved, her strength, her violet eyes, it all clicked into place. She wasn't just an advanced native warrior. She was alien. Bellatrix sensed his gaze. She turned, her eyes locking onto his. Atlas held up the dark shard. He saw a flicker of something in her eyes, a fleeting emotion he couldn't quite decipher. Recognition, perhaps, or a touch of surprise at his discovery. This, he began, his voice raspy, is not from Kaelan. He pointed to the shard, then made a sweeping gesture towards the stars. From far. Bellatrix rose and walked towards him. She took the shard from his hand, her long, slender fingers examining it. She made a low, guttural sound, not a growl but a sigh, laden with something like ancient sorrow. She then pointed to herself, then to the shard, then to the sky again. The message was clear. She was from far. She was from the stars. Atlas felt a profound shift. The mystery had deepened, but so had their connection. He was not just allied with a powerful warrior. He was allied with a being from another world, stranded like him, though perhaps for a different reason. The warmth he felt earlier intensified, replaced by a sense of awe and a fierce protectiveness. He was no longer just a partner out of necessity. He was part of something monumental, a shared secret across the vastness of space. He pointed to the shard again, then around the oasis. More, he asked, his voice low, here. Bellatrix looked at him, her violet eyes holding a depth he was only beginning to comprehend. She nodded slowly. The oasis was not just a sanctuary, it was a key. Atlas knew their journey had just become infinitely more complex and infinitely more important. He was ready. He was ready. Bellatrix led him towards the deeper pools of the oasis, her violet eyes scanning the rock faces. She pointed to crevices, then to the dark shard in her hand. Atlas understood. They needed to find more of these artifacts, pieces of her lost past, perhaps parts of the beacon itself. He knelt, plunging his hands into the cool, clear water, feeling along the slick rocks beneath. The water here was deeper, obscuring the bottom. He moved carefully, his fingers brushing against smooth, unnatural surfaces hidden by sediment. Here he murmured, pulling out a larger fragment, identical in material to the first. It was heavier, more substantial. He held it up. Bellatrix nodded, a flicker of something like grim satisfaction in her gaze. They worked in silence, a shared purpose binding them. Atlas found another piece, then another, each discovery reinforcing the monumental scale of their shared secret. He felt a surge of adrenaline, not from danger, but from the thrill of uncovering something truly ancient and alien. Suddenly, a sharp whistle pierced the air. Bellatrix stiffened, her head snapping up. Her ears swiveled, catching sounds Atlas couldn't perceive. Her body coiled, a predator instantly on alert. She pushed Atlas behind a cluster of dense, broad-leafed plants, her hand on his arm, a silent command for him to stay hidden. Rough, guttural shouts echoed from the canyon entrance. Shadows detached themselves from the rock walls. These were not the Kalan nomads he had encountered before. Their clothing was patchwork, their movements aggressive, their faces hardened by desperation. Scavengers. They carried crude, yet effective, energy weapons and blades fashioned from scavenged metal. They moved with a predatory efficiency that spoke of experience in raiding. "Stay," Bellatrix whispered, her voice a low growl, urgent and protective. She drew a long, curved blade from her hip, its edge gleaming in the filtered light. The scavengers descended into the oasis, their eyes wide with greed at the sight of the water and the small, verdant paradise. They didn't see Atlas. They saw Bellatrix, a lone figure, and the glint of technology she held. One of them, a broad-shouldered male with a scarred face, pointed his energy weapon at her. The alien, he snarled in a harsh, unfamiliar tongue. "Give us the tech." Bellatrix did not reply. She moved, a blur of white fur and muscle, intercepting the first scavenger who lunged at her. Her blade flashed, a swift, decisive strike. The scavenger cried out, stumbling back, clutching a superficial wound. This was a diversion. 3 more scavengers burst from the rocks, moving to flank her. Atlas knew he couldn't just hide. He looked around, his gaze falling on loose rocks near the water's edge. Not much, but it was something. He grabbed a fist-sized stone, his heart pounding. He had to help. This was their alliance. Bellatrix fought with terrifying grace, deflecting energy blasts with her blade, using the terrain to her advantage. She was outnumbered but incredibly fast. She disabled 2 more scavengers, disarming them with precise, powerful blows. But the initial group was now joined by reinforcements. A dozen more figures emerged, heavily armed, their intent clear. They wanted the technology, and they were prepared to kill for it. An energy blast seared past Bellatrix's head, dangerously close. She retaliated, felling another attacker, but then a scavenger with a long spear charged from her blind side. Bellatrix spun, parrying the spear, but another scavenger fired a close-range energy burst. She twisted, shielding Atlas with her body, taking the hit directly in her side. A pained gasp escaped her. She stumbled, dropping her blade, her hand going to the smoking wound. The scavengers pressed their advantage, closing in. "Bellatrix," Atlas shouted, abandoning his hiding spot. He hurled the rock he held, striking one scavenger squarely in the head. The attacker reeled, disoriented. It was a desperate, foolish move, but it bought a fraction of a second. Bellatrix, despite her injury, snarled, pushing herself upright. "Go," she commanded, her voice strained but fierce. She grabbed Atlas's arm, pulling him towards a narrow gap in the rocks at the far end of the oasis. She knew this place. She had a plan. They ran, Bellatrix limping, her breathing ragged. Atlas felt a cold dread gripping him. He could see the blood blossoming on her white fur. The scavengers were close behind, their shouts growing louder. He had to protect her, but how? He was human, limited. She was alien, powerful, but wounded because of him. The thought burned. "This way," Bellatrix grunted, pointing into a dark, winding crevice. The passage was barely wide enough for one person, forcing them to squeeze through. The scavengers, larger and more burdened by their weapons, would be slowed. As they moved deeper into the rock formation, the light from the oasis faded. The air grew cooler, heavier. Bellatrix leaned against Atlas for support, her strength visibly draining. He could feel her shuddering breaths, the warmth of her blood seeping through her fur and onto his arm. His own exhaustion, pushed aside by adrenaline, now began to creep back. He was carrying her weight, almost literally. He looked at her, her face pale, her violet eyes clouded with pain. "We need to stop the bleeding," he urged, his voice tight with concern. He knew basic first aid, but he had no supplies. She shook her head, a grim set to her jaw. "No time, they follow." She pointed further into the darkness. "Hidden, a place." Her voice was weaker now. Atlas stumbled, his feet slipping on loose gravel. His mind raced. He had faced countless dangers, but never with someone so utterly reliant on him, someone whose life hung in his hands. He felt a fierce, primal need to keep her safe, to survive this. He was no warrior, but he was resilient. He would find a way. They had to keep moving. He pushed away his own pain, his own fear. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about Bellatrix, about their shared journey, about the monumental secret they carried. He would not let her fall. He tightened his grip around her, supporting her weight, urging her forward into the suffocating gloom. The suffocating gloom gave way to a wider cavern. Bellatrix stumbled, her legs giving out. Atlas caught her, easing her down onto a cold, smooth rock surface. Her breath hitched, a guttural sound of pain. He knelt beside her, his hands hovering over the energy blast wound on her side. The white fur around it was matted with blood. "It's deep," he stated, his voice tight. He tore a strip from his shirt, crude but necessary. "I need to clean this." She watched him, her violet eyes still sharp despite her agony. "No time," she rasped. "Pod. There." She gestured with a weak paw towards a darker recess in the cavern wall. Atlas looked. A hulking, oddly shaped craft lay half buried in the rockfall, its metallic surface dulled by ages of dust. It was clearly alien, far beyond anything he had ever seen. He understood. This was their last chance. "Can it work?" he asked, his gaze sweeping over the console, a jumble of unfamiliar controls and glowing symbols. Bellatrix nodded slowly. "Dormant, signal broken," she winced, a tremor running through her frame. "You fix." He moved to the console, his geological instincts kicking in, though this was not rock. He ran his fingers over the strange glyphs, the smooth, cool metal. He recognized power conduits, communication relays, even if the language was foreign. His mind, trained to dissect complex systems, began to seek patterns. "I need power, and a clear signal path." He looked back at her, the scavengers. "They will find us." A distant clatter echoed from the crevice entrance. Their time was running out. Bellatrix pushed herself up, a groan escaping her lips. "I will slow them," she declared, her voice regaining a fraction of its former strength. She reached for the blade still sheathed at her hip. "No," Atlas insisted, turning from the console. "You're too hurt. You can't fight them like this." She met his gaze, a fierce light in her eyes. "You beacon, important." Her tail twitched, a silent command. "My task, protect." He saw the unwavering resolve in her face. He knew arguing was pointless. His heart ached, a sharp, unfamiliar pain. He had to trust her, he had to succeed. "Be careful," he urged, the words barely a whisper. He turned back to the pod, his hands flying over the console. He found a main power conduit, a thick cable that had been severed. This was familiar territory. He needed to bridge it. Bellatrix limped towards the crevice mouth, her movements stiff, but a predatory glint had returned to her eyes. She positioned herself behind a cluster of jagged rocks, her white fur almost blending with the pale stone. Atlas worked frantically. He found 2 exposed wires glowing faintly with latent energy. He needed a conductor. His eyes scanned the cave, desperate. Then he remembered the dark shards they had unearthed at the oasis, the alien artifacts. He pulled one from his satchel, its surface impossibly smooth and dense. Could it be conductive? He pressed it against the 2 severed wires. A jolt, a flash of light, and the console flared to life, symbols glowing brighter, a low hum filling the cavern. "Power," he shouted, a surge of triumph mixing with dread. He started analyzing the comms array, identifying damaged relays, broken circuits. This was a puzzle far more complex than any rock formation. Outside, the first scavenger appeared at the crevice mouth. Bellatrix lunged, a swift, silent blur. A grunt of pain, a clang of metal, and the scavenger fell. But then another appeared and another. Bellatrix fought with a desperate ferocity, her movements less fluid than before but no less deadly. Her blade flashed, a silver arc in the dim light. Each blow seemed to cost her. Atlas could hear her strained breaths, the increasing frequency of impacts. He needed more time. He saw a broken comms dish, its crystalline structure fractured. He carefully manipulated the fragments, trying to align them to coax a signal pathway. His fingers, usually so steady, trembled with urgency. He thought of her, fighting, bleeding for him. He would not fail her. "Hold them," he yelled, though he knew she could not hear him over the din of battle. Bellatrix pressed her attack, forcing the scavengers back, but her wounded side clearly hampered her. One scavenger managed to land a glancing blow with a blunt weapon, sending her stumbling. She recovered, snarling, but her strength was visibly fading. Atlas found a bypass circuit, a risky gamble. He rerouted power, hopping to override the damaged components. The console flickered, then stabilized. A single, distinct symbol glowed green. Signal ready. He slammed his hand onto the activation panel. The pod shuddered, a deep thrum vibrating through the cavern floor. A pillar of pure, white light erupted from the pod's antenna, piercing through the rock ceiling, streaking upwards into the blackness of the Kaelan night sky. A moment of profound silence followed, broken only by the distant sounds of Bellatrix's struggle. The signal was sent. They had done it. Atlas rushed to the crevice entrance, pulling Bellatrix back into the cavern. She collapsed against him, her blade falling from her grasp. Two scavengers lay defeated at the entrance, but more were coming. "It's done," he whispered, holding her close, feeling the rhythmic throb of her heart against his chest. "The signal is out." She looked up at him, her violet eyes wide, filled with a mixture of pain and relief. A faint smile touched her lips. "Good," she breathed, her voice barely audible. "Now we wait." He held her, feeling the warmth of her body, the fragile hope that now pulsed between them. The signal was a beacon, a promise of rescue, but also a declaration. Their location was known. The fight was not over, but they had taken a monumental step. For the first time since their journey began, Atlas felt a profound sense of purpose, not just for survival, but for a future he now shared with this extraordinary being. He tightened his embrace, a silent vow to protect her, no matter what came next. Heavy bootfalls echoed just beyond the crevice mouth. The scavengers were regrouping, their numbers still significant. Atlas scanned the cavern. The pod pulsed faintly, a silent guardian. Its light cast long, dancing shadows, revealing deeper recesses. "We need to move," he whispered, his voice rough. Bellatrix winced as he shifted her weight, her breath shallow. Her violet eyes, though clouded with pain, held a spark of understanding. "Deeper," she rasped, pointing a weak hand towards a narrower passage at the back of the cavern. "Hide." Atlas nodded, gathering her into his arms. Her blade remained on the ground. He could not carry both. He had to trust she would not need it immediately. He half carried, half dragged her through the tight opening, the rough rock scraping his back. The passage sloped downwards, leading into a smaller, darker chamber. The air grew cooler here, still and heavy. He gently lowered Bellatrix against a smooth rock face, then knelt beside her. Her injury was worse than he first thought, a deep laceration on her side, still seeping. He ripped a strip from his shirt, pressing it firmly against the wound. Bellatrix hissed, her body tensing, but she did not pull away. "Hold still," he instructed, his hand steady despite the tremor in his gut. "We need to stop the bleeding." Her eyes locked onto his, a silent question passing between them. He understood. How long before rescue? How long could they hold out? From the main cavern, the sounds of shouting intensified. A scavenger's voice, rough and guttural, snarled orders. They were entering. Atlas peered back through the narrow passage, barely able to see the faint glow of the pod. He had to secure their position. "Stay here," he ordered Bellatrix, rising. He moved quickly, finding a loose pile of smaller rocks near the passage entrance. He began to stack them, creating a makeshift barricade. It would not hold them long, but it would buy precious time. Bellatrix watched him, her gaze unwavering. "You will be seen," she warned, her voice a strained whisper. "They won't get past me," Atlas replied, gritting his teeth as he heaved a particularly heavy stone into place. He worked with a fierce determination, fueled by a primal need to shield her. He was not a warrior, but he was stubborn, and he would not yield. A sudden bang echoed from the main cavern, then another. They were trying to force their way into the passage. The rocks he had piled shuddered. "Atlas," Bellatrix murmured, her hand reaching for his arm. He turned, seeing the fear in her eyes, not for herself but for him. "I'm not leaving you," he stated, his voice firm. He pulled a smaller, jagged rock from the pile, gripping it tightly. It was a poor weapon, but it was all he had. The opening of their hiding place was narrow enough for only one person to attempt entry at a time. He would face them here. He would make them pay for every inch. A shadow fell across the opening, then a grunt of effort. A scavenger, armed with a crude energy club, tried to squeeze through. Atlas swung the rock, connecting with a sickening thud against the scavenger's arm. The attacker roared, recoiling. "Atlas, behind you!" Bellatrix cried out, her voice stronger than he expected. He spun, seeing another scavenger attempting to climb down from a higher ledge into their chamber, bypassing his barricade. Atlas reacted instantly. He scrambled up the rock face, intercepting the scavenger mid-descent. He tackled the attacker, sending them both tumbling to the cavern floor. The scavenger's club flew wide, clattering against the rock. Atlas landed a punch, then another, fueled by a desperation he had never known. The scavenger fought back, strong and brutal, but Atlas had the element of surprise. He slammed the scavenger's head against the rock, knocking him unconscious. He quickly dragged the body away from the entrance, then moved back to Bellatrix. She was struggling to sit up, her hand pressed to her side. "You fought well," she said, a hint of admiration in her eyes. The pain was still there, but a new resolve had settled over her features. "We need to create more distance," Atlas said, his chest heaving. He saw a fissure, barely wide enough for them, leading further into the darkness. "Can you walk?" Bellatrix pushed herself up, biting back a cry of pain. "I can," she affirmed, her gaze unwavering. "Where do we go?" "Deeper," he replied, helping her to her feet, "until they can't follow." They moved slowly, carefully, deeper into the earth. The air grew thin, but the sounds of the scavengers faded behind them. They found a small, sheltered alcove, just large enough for them to huddle together. Atlas pulled her close, sharing his body heat, trying to comfort her. "The signal is out," he reminded her, his voice soft. "Help is coming." She leaned her head against his shoulder, her purr a low, rumbling vibration against his chest. It was a sound of profound trust, of weary relief. He felt her strength, even in her weakness, and knew that together they would face whatever came next. The scavengers still lurked, a danger they had only temporarily evaded, but within this quiet darkness, a different kind of strength was forged, an unbreakable bond in the heart of Kalen. Atlas checked the last of their water bladders. A thin film remained, barely enough for a few more sips each. Bellatrix watched him, her violet eyes reflecting the faint glow from his comms unit, which he used as a dim light source. Her breathing was shallow, a testament to the pain she still endured. "Not much left," Atlas stated, his voice a low murmur. "Enough," Bellatrix responded, her voice raspy. She shifted slightly, a soft groan escaping her. Atlas knelt beside her, gently adjusting the bandage on her side. The wound was deep, but the makeshift poultice he had applied seemed to be holding. You need rest, he urged. Deep rest. She shook her head slowly. Cannot, they are near. He listened, straining his ears against the silence of the fissure. He heard nothing but the beat of his own heart. We blocked the passage. They won't get through easily. They are patient, she countered, a primal edge to her tone. Like desert predators, they wait. Atlas leaned back against the rough rock, pulling his knees to his chest. How long will it take for the signal to reach your people? Bellatrix closed her eyes for a moment, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her features. Depends on range, on interference, on their patrol routes. It could be a cycle, or many. A cycle. He knew that could mean days or even weeks on Kaelin. His mind raced, calculating their dwindling resources, the severity of Bellatrix's injury, the constant threat of the scavengers. He had to keep her alive. He had to keep them both alive. My home, Atlas began, breaking the silence. Earth. We have different kinds of deserts. Some are cold. Some are just rock and sand like Kaelin, but with more life, more water. He paused, looking at her. We have cities that reach the clouds, and oceans so deep light cannot touch the bottom. Bellatrix opened her eyes, a spark of curiosity in their depths. Clouds, water that deep. Yes, he confirmed. And trees so tall you could build a house in their branches, forests that never end. He saw a yearning in her gaze, a longing for something alien to her harsh reality. What is Viridian Prime like? A faint smile touched her lips, a rare, beautiful sight. Viridian Prime is green, always green. Our cities grow from the living rock, intertwined with giant flora. Water flows freely. We do not know thirst. Her eyes softened with memory. My family, they are weavers of light. They shape crystalline structures to channel solar energy. They will worry. They will come, Atlas assured her, his hand finding hers. Her skin was rough, calloused, yet a warmth spread through him. You sent the beacon. They will find you. He felt her purr again, a low vibration that resonated deep within his own chest, a unique comfort in the grim darkness. It was a sound of trust, of acceptance, a bond forged in fire and sand. He squeezed her hand gently. We need to conserve our strength and our water. A sudden, sharp crack echoed from the passage they had sealed. Both stiffened, every muscle tensing. It sounded like a rock shifting, or perhaps something heavier being pressed against the barricade. They are trying to widen it, Bellatrix whispered, her gaze fixed on the narrow entrance. Atlas moved without hesitation. He grabbed a loose, sharp-edged rock. Stay here, I will check. No, Bellatrix commanded, her voice weak but firm. You cannot fight them all alone. You are valuable. You are needed for the pod. The pod is activated, Atlas countered. My priority now is your safety. He moved towards the fissure entrance, pressing his ear to the cold rock. The sounds were intermittent, scraping, grinding. They were definitely trying to break through. He saw a small, almost imperceptible tremor run through the rock face. Their alcove, while sheltered, was not entirely stable. The constant pressure from the scavengers, combined with the natural instability of the ancient cave system, posed a new threat. The integrity of this passage, Atlas said, turning back to Bellatrix, it's not sound. If they keep at it, they could bring down a section, or destabilize the whole area. He pointed to a hairline crack widening slightly above them. We need to find a more secure location, deeper in, away from their direct assault. Bellatrix nodded, pushing herself up with a grunt of pain. I can move. We must. Slowly, Atlas instructed, helping her to her feet. He supported her weight, guiding her deeper into the winding, dark tunnels. The air grew colder, heavier, carrying the scent of damp earth and ancient minerals. Each step was a measured effort, Bellatrix leaning heavily against him, her breath coming in ragged gasps. They navigated twisting turns, the beam from Atlas's comms unit casting dancing shadows. The scavengers' sounds faded, replaced by the drip of unseen water and the scuttle of cave-dwelling creatures. After what felt like an eternity, they found a wider chamber, its ceiling high and arched, offering a greater sense of security. Here, Atlas said, easing Bellatrix down onto a flat ledge. This looks more stable. He quickly surveyed the area, noting several smaller passages leading off into unknown darkness. This chamber offered multiple escape routes if needed. He checked her wound again, his brow furrowed with concern. The movement had strained it. "We cannot stay here indefinitely," Bellatrix observed, her eyes scanning the new surroundings. "The air will grow stale. Our water will run out." "I know," Atlas replied, a flicker of grim determination in his eyes, "but we bought more time. Time for your people to find the signal." He paused, listening intently. A faint, low thrumming sound echoed through the chamber, distant but growing steadily stronger. It was not the grinding of rock, nor the scuttle of scavengers. It was a rhythmic, almost mechanical vibration. Bellatrix's ears swiveled, her head tilted. A new intensity filled her gaze, a mix of hope and apprehension. "That sound," she breathed, a spark of recognition in her voice. "It is not Kaelin." Atlas felt a surge of adrenaline. It was a sound of power, of propulsion, alien to the natural silence of the deep earth. Was it the rescue? Or something else, drawn by the beacon they had sent? He met Bellatrix's eyes, a silent question passing between them. They had faced one threat and moved beyond it, only to find another approaching. His hand instinctively went to the small, dark shard he still carried, a connection to the very thing that had brought them together. They would face this too, whatever it was, side by side. The thrumming intensified, vibrating through the rock beneath them. It was low, resonant, filling the cavern with an almost palpable energy. Atlas tightened his grip on the dark shard, its cool surface a strange comfort. Bellatrix, despite her pain, pushed herself slightly upright, her violet eyes fixed on the entrance passage. "It is close," she whispered, her voice a low growl, "too small for a transport. A scout, perhaps." "Whose scout?" Atlas asked, his gaze sweeping the chamber, looking for cover for an advantage. His heart hammered, a primal response to the unknown. He moved closer to Bellatrix, a protective instinct overriding his exhaustion. A sudden, sharp metallic whine pierced the air, followed by a rush of displaced air. From the main passage, a sleek, dark metallic drone, no larger than a human torso, glided silently into the chamber. It had no visible propulsion, no exposed seams, just a smooth obsidian shell. A single, multifaceted optical sensor swiveled, sweeping the cavern with a soft, azure light. Bellatrix tensed, her ears flattening against her head. "A Viridian scout," she confirmed, a mix of relief and caution in her tone. "But I do not recognize this model. It is newer." The drone paused, its sensor locking onto them. The azure light intensified, bathing them in its glow. Atlas felt a faint tingling sensation, as if his very cells were being analyzed. He instinctively shielded Bellatrix slightly with his body. "Is it friendly?" he asked, his voice low. "It is ours," she replied, a hint of unease in her eyes. "But it is automated. Its protocols may not account for my condition or for you." The drone emitted a series of rapid, complex clicks and whistles, a language Atlas did not understand. Bellatrix listened intently, her expression shifting from apprehension to growing concern. "It demands identification codes," she translated, her brow furrowing. "My internal comms are damaged. It cannot read me." She tried to speak, to project her own identification, but her voice was weak, the words failing to form the complex patterns required. Atlas watched the drone, his mind racing. It was their people, yet they were not recognized. A rescue, but a rigid, unyielding one. "Can you override it?" he asked. Bellatrix shook her head. "Not without my comms. It will simply follow its programmed directives." The drone emitted another series of clicks, then shifted slightly, revealing a small, recessed panel on its underside. A faint red light pulsed within. "What is it doing now?" Atlas pressed, sensing urgency. "It is preparing to transmit a warning," Bellatrix said, her voice strained. "To relay our position but not our identities. It will tag us as unknown biologicals in restricted territory." That is not good, Atlas stated grimly. They might send a retrieval unit but not a rescue, or worse, a containment team. He studied the drone, its sleek form, its silent movement, its focus sensor. It was clearly designed for observation and data transmission. It had no visible weaponry, but that did not mean it was harmless. His gaze fell on the dark shard in his hand, the Oasis artifacts, the pod. They were all connected. The shard, he muttered, holding it up. Could this work? It's Viridian tech, isn't it? Bellatrix's eyes widened slightly. It is ancient, from before the Exodus. It should be inert, but it is of the same energy signature. Worth a try, Atlas decided, taking a cautious step towards the drone. If it's scanning, maybe it will recognize the energy signature. He held the shard out, slowly extending his arm towards the drone's glowing sensor. The drone's clicks intensified, its azure light flickering. It seemed to hesitate, its smooth body hovering a few feet away. Atlas felt a surge of hope. This was a long shot, but it was their only shot. He focused on the shard, willing it to connect. Suddenly, the red light on the drone's underside flared, then died. The clicking ceased. The azure sensor light dimmed, then shifted to a soft, pulsing green. A new melodic chime echoed through the chamber, a sound of recognition. Bellatrix gasped, a tremor running through her. It is accepting, she breathed, disbelief and relief mingling in her voice. Your shard. It is authenticating a legacy code. The drone rotated, its green light now fixed on Bellatrix. A soft, modulated voice, synthesized and calm, emanated from its form. Identity, Bellatrix of the Viridian Prime. Status, injured. Alliance, unconfirmed human detected. Threat assessment, negative. Atlas lowered the shard, a wave of exhaustion washing over him. It had worked. He looked at Bellatrix, a shared triumph in their eyes. Unconfirmed human, he repeated, a wry smile touching his lips. Better than unknown biological. It has flagged you as a non-threat, Bellatrix explained, her voice gaining strength. A diplomatic anomaly. This is unprecedented. She tried to push herself further up, leaning forward with renewed hope. It will transmit my location. They will send a proper rescue. The drone hovered for a moment longer, its green light pulsing. Then, with another series of soft chimes, it reversed course, gliding silently back towards the main passage. It paused at the entrance, its sensor turning back one last time as if taking a final data point. Then, with a faint rush of air, it disappeared, the thrumming fading into the distance. Silence returned to the chamber, deeper than before. Atlas slumped against the wall, the adrenaline slowly dissipating. Bellatrix watched the empty passage, a profound relief washing over her features. It is done, she said, her voice soft, almost fragile. They know we are found. Atlas nodded, his gaze meeting hers. But not rescued yet, he reminded her gently. They'll still need to get here, and we still have scavengers to worry about. Bellatrix closed her eyes for a moment, a deep, shuddering breath escaping her. True, but the waiting is different now. It is with purpose. She opened her eyes, fixing them on Atlas. You saved us. Again. That shard, your quick thinking. No Viridian would have thought of it. Atlas felt a warmth spread through him, a feeling far more comforting than the temporary relief of the drone's departure. We are a team, he said simply, reaching out to gently touch her hand. Her fur was soft beneath his fingers, side by side. The chamber felt less oppressive now, the air of desperate waiting replaced by a fragile hope. They had made contact. The path ahead was still fraught with danger, with the lingering threat of scavengers and the unknown protocols of Bellatrix's people, but for the first time in days, a clear destination was in sight. Their bond, forged in the crucible of Kalen, now extended into the vastness of interstellar space. They just had to survive until the real rescue arrived. We need to conserve what little water we have, Atlas said, his voice low, breaking the heavy silence. He rummaged through his pack, finding the last half-empty flask. No telling how long proper rescue takes. Bellatrix shifted, her violet eyes scanning the cavern entrance. Viridian protocols are efficient. Once a legacy code is authenticated, a high-priority response is initiated. Hours, perhaps, not days. Her voice held a note of certainty, but her body language betrayed her pain. She winced, adjusting her position to ease the pressure on her wounded side. Hours can be a lifetime down here, Atlas countered, handing her the flask, especially with them still out there. He gestured vaguely towards the main passage. A faint scraping sound echoed from the direction of their barricade, a grim reminder. Bellatrix took a small sip, then passed the flask back. They will grow desperate. They want the pod's technology. They will assume we are still trying to activate it, not that we already have. Atlas nodded, a plan forming in his mind. Then we make them think we're still working on it. Give them something to focus on, something to distract them. He looked around the small alcove. The deactivated pod components lay scattered, useless now, but still recognizable as advanced tech. How? She asked, her gaze following his. We create a diversion, Atlas explained. Or rather, we make it look like we're still trying to create one. They think we're vulnerable, trapped. We use that. He picked up a small, metallic panel from the pod's former shell. This might make some noise if it falls, sounds like we are tampering with something important. He moved to the small gap in their rock barricade, peering out cautiously. The passage beyond was dark, but he could sense movement. The scavengers were definitely still there, likely planning their next move. He carefully placed the panel on a loose rock near the opening, angled so a slight vibration would send it clattering. They won't just stand by, Bellatrix warned. They will try a more direct approach now. Explosives, perhaps. Then we need to be ready, Atlas said, returning to her side. He found a sturdy, flat stone, testing its weight. If they breach this, we retreat further into the fissure. Is there another way out from here? Bellatrix shook her head. No, this alcove is a dead end, but the fissure extends deeper. It's unstable, though, very unstable. Unstable works for us, Atlas murmured, his mind racing. If they push in, we could trigger a collapse. Bury them. That is a dangerous gamble, Bellatrix said, her eyes narrowing. You could bury us too. Every option is dangerous, Atlas replied, meeting her gaze. But if it's a choice between us or them, I choose us. He placed the heavy stone near her, then another. These could buy us time, or block them entirely. A sudden, sharp crack echoed from the barricade, followed by a shower of small pebbles. The scavengers were using an energy cutter or something similar to bore through the rock. The metallic panel Atlas had placed clattered down, making a surprisingly loud noise. They are getting through, Bellatrix said, tensing. Her hand went to her side, but she pushed through the pain. Stay back, Atlas commanded, moving to the barricade. He could see a glowing point growing steadily larger. They're drilling. He grabbed a handful of loose scree and dust, waiting for the hole to widen further. When the glowing point became a small aperture, he hurled the debris directly into it, hoping to momentarily blind or disorient whoever was on the other side. A grunt of surprise came from beyond, followed by a curse. It will not stop them for long, Bellatrix stated, watching him. They will have goggles or shields. I know, Atlas said, pulling back, but it buys us seconds, and seconds are what we need. He glanced at the ceiling of the alcove. Cracks spiderwebbed across the rock. We need to make this collapse look accidental or at least hard to trace. He moved quickly, examining the fissure's structure. There was a section of rock, precariously balanced, that might yield to a well-placed impact. He needed something heavy, something with leverage. His eyes landed on a discarded structural beam from the pod, a meter long and made of dense, alien alloy. Help me with this, Atlas grunted, pulling at the beam. Bellatrix, despite her injury, pushed herself up and grasped the other end. Together, they dragged the heavy beam to the weakest point in the fissure's ceiling. What is your plan? She asked, her breath coming in short gasps. We wait until they commit to entering, Atlas explained, positioning the beam. When they're halfway through, we bring this down. Not enough to seal the main passage, just enough to block this fissure entrance and create a lot of noise. Make them think the whole place is falling apart. Another section of the barricade crumbled inward, creating a larger opening. A scavenger's boot appeared, followed by a gloved hand. Now Bellatrix whispered, her eyes fixed on the encroaching figures. Not yet, Atlas replied, his grip firm on the beam. Let them think they have us. He waited, his heart pounding, for a second scavenger to begin squeezing through. The first one was almost fully inside the alcove, their energy weapons scanning the small space. Now Atlas yelled. With a coordinated effort, they leveraged the beam, pushing it against the unstable rock above. A deep groan emanated from the ceiling, followed by a shower of dust. The section of rock they targeted gave way, falling with a thunderous roar. The first scavenger shrieked, caught by falling debris. The second, still in the opening, tried to scramble back, but more rock cascaded down, sealing the fissure entrance with a deafening crash. Dust filled the air, choking them both. Atlas coughed, wiping his eyes. He couldn't see anything beyond the newly formed rockfall. The sounds of the scavengers were muffled, but he could hear shouts of frustration and pain. Bellatrix leaned against him, her body trembling from the exertion and the pain. That was effective, she gasped, a hint of admiration in her voice, and quite loud. Loud enough to make them think twice, Atlas said, pulling her deeper into the alcove, away from the settling dust. He checked her wound. The earlier bandage was still holding, but the exertion had clearly aggravated it. We bought ourselves more time, he stated, his voice calmer now. They won't be breaching that quickly again, not without risking the entire passage collapsing on them. Bellatrix nodded, resting her head on his shoulder. Her fur brushed against his cheek, a surprisingly comforting sensation amidst the chaos. You are resourceful, Atlas, far more than any Viridian I have known. Atlas felt a flush of warmth. And you are resilient, Bellatrix, far more than any human. He squeezed her hand gently. We just have to hold on a little longer. Rescue is coming. The chamber was silent once more, save for their ragged breaths and the occasional creak of settling rock. The dust slowly began to clear, revealing their new, more secure barricade. The threat outside was still real, but they had faced it, adapted, and survived another desperate encounter. Hope, though still fragile, solidified in the quiet determination of their shared gaze. They were a team, now more than ever, facing the unknown together, waiting for the stars to answer their call. Atlas gently lowered Bellatrix onto a relatively flat surface, a natural shelf of rock. Her skin, where visible, was pale beneath her white fur, and her breathing was shallow. He carefully unwrapped the makeshift bandage from her side. The wound, a jagged burn from the energy blast, looked angry and inflamed. The exertion of the rockfall had caused it to bleed anew, staining the surrounding fur a dull crimson. This is bad, Bellatrix, he murmured, his voice tight with concern. He knew basic first aid, but this was beyond anything he could properly treat with their limited supplies. We need medical attention soon. Very soon. Bellatrix winced as he applied pressure to the wound with a fresh strip of cloth torn from his shirt. Her violet eyes met his, full of a pain she tried to hide. Viridian medical units are swift, she stated, her voice a strained whisper, but even they have limits to travel speed. From beyond the newly collapsed rock, they heard muffled thumps and scraping sounds. The scavengers were not giving up. They were testing the new barrier, perhaps trying to dislodge smaller pieces or assessing its stability. They're persistent, Atlas observed, listening intently. They really want what's in that pod. They want the power core, Bellatrix clarified, her gaze distant. Viridian energy cores are valuable. A single one can power a small settlement for cycles. Atlas repositioned her, trying to make her more comfortable. How long do you think we have? He asked, not just about the scavengers, but about the wound. She closed her eyes briefly. Hours. Maybe a day if I remain still, but the infection will take hold. Her candor was unsettling. My healing factor is slowed by the energy blast. It interfered with my cellular regeneration. A cold dread settled in Atlas's stomach. They had bought time from the scavengers, but at what cost to Bellatrix? He rummaged through his small pack, finding the last of their water rations. There was barely enough for a few more sips. "Drink this," he urged, holding the flask to her lips. She took a small, reluctant sip, then pushed it back. "You need it more," she said. "You expended much energy today." "We share it," Atlas insisted, taking a small gulp himself before offering it again. "We always share." She nodded, accepting another small amount. Her trust in him was absolute, a silent understanding that transcended their species and cultures. "What do you think they're doing out there?" Atlas asked, trying to distract her from the pain. Bellatrix listened. "They are attempting to find another entrance, or they are assessing the rockfall's stability, considering a more aggressive approach." She paused, her ears twitching. "They are not moving much debris. They are being cautious." "Good," Atlas muttered. "At least they're not suicidal." He sat beside her, leaning back against the cool rock. The air was still thick with dust, but it was settling. The silence stretched, punctuated only by their breathing and the distant, muffled sounds of the scavengers. He thought about his own homeworld, the lush green forests, the endless blue oceans. It felt like a lifetime ago. "When the Viridian ship arrives," Bellatrix said, her voice softer now, "they will be thorough. They will clear the area, secure the pod, and then attend to us." "And then what?" Atlas asked, turning his head to look at her. "What happens to you, to me?" Her violet eyes were deep, reflective. "I will be debriefed. My mission parameters will be reevaluated. My people will be grateful for your assistance." She reached out, her clawed hand gently touching his arm. "They will acknowledge your courage, Atlas, your resourcefulness." "And you," he pressed, "will you go back to Viridian Prime, to your family?" A subtle shift in her expression. "My family is my unit. My unit is gone. My purpose was this mission. Now it is changed." She looked away, her gaze fixed on the cavern wall. "Viridian Prime is home, but it is also a place of strict protocols, of duty." Atlas understood. He was a man who had often found solace in the wild, away from the complexities of human society. Her life of duty, while honorable, might feel restrictive after their desperate journey. "What if you don't want to go back to strict protocols?" he asked, a hopeful note in his voice. "What if you found a different purpose?" She turned back to him, a flicker of something he couldn't quite name in her eyes. "My purpose has become intertwined with yours, Atlas. Our alliance, forged in fire and sand, is not easily broken by mere distance or duty." Her hand tightened on his arm, a comforting, firm pressure. "You saved me, many times over. You gave me hope when I had none." His heart swelled. "You did the same for me, Bellatrix. You gave me a reason to keep going when I thought I was lost." A faint tremor ran through the rock beneath them. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Atlas, with his geologist's sensitivity, felt it. It wasn't the scavengers. It felt deeper, like the shifting of the earth itself. Bellatrix felt it too. Her ears swiveled, her gaze sharpening. "That was not an external force," she stated, her voice low. "That was the rock settling. The collapse may have destabilized more than just the entrance." Atlas nodded, his brow furrowed. "This entire fissure system is old, prone to collapse. We used that to our advantage, but it might be a double-edged blade." He looked up at the ceiling, then around their small alcove. "If this chamber is connected to the main fissure in other ways, a larger collapse could seal us incompletely. Or worse." The faint scraping sounds from outside had stopped. Now there was only silence from the scavengers. This new quiet was more unnerving than their earlier efforts. It implied a change in strategy, perhaps a more dangerous one. "We bought ourselves time," Bellatrix reiterated, her eyes still on him, "but the clock still ticks. For my wound and for this place." Atlas reached out, gently taking her hand. Her fur was soft against his palm. "We'll face it together, Bellatrix. whatever comes next. A soft, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips, a rare expression that warmed his chest. Always together, Atlas. Her grip on his hand was strong, even in her weakened state, a silent promise. They were still in danger, still waiting, but the bond between them was an unshakable anchor in the shifting darkness. Their shared future, uncertain as it was, felt brighter with that connection. The silence from outside was a heavy blanket, more oppressive than the previous scraping. Atlas listened, every muscle taut, but only the ragged rhythm of Bellatrix's breathing filled their small alcove. Her violet eyes, though still clouded with pain, held a sharp, unwavering focus. "They are regrouping," Bellatrix whispered, her voice a dry rustle, "or planning something more direct." A low groan echoed through the rock, deeper than any tremor before. Dust rained from the ceiling, gritty and fine, dusting their fur and clothes. Bellatrix winced, a flicker of pain crossing her face as the movement aggravated her wound. "That felt different," Atlas confirmed, his hand instinctively going to the rock face, feeling the faint vibrations. Less like a localized shift, more like a foundational stress. He scanned the ceiling, his geologist's eyes searching for new cracks, new weaknesses. The entire system is under pressure. What we did to seal the entrance might have just accelerated the inevitable. A soft thud sounded from the collapsed passage outside, then another, more distinct. It wasn't drilling. It sounded like something being placed against the rock. "They're using charges," Bellatrix stated, her ears swiveling. "Not to breach, but to collapse, to entomb us." Atlas's heart seized. That was a brutal, efficient tactic. If the scavengers couldn't get the core, they would ensure no one else could and eliminate a threat. "We can't just sit here," he said, his mind racing. "If they bring down the main fissure, we're done." "No," Bellatrix countered, her grip on his hand firm. "Not yet. This alcove has structural integrity, but the passage leading to it might not." She coughed, a dry, painful sound. "We need to find another way out. Or draw them in, then seal them with us." "Drawing them in is too risky, especially with your condition," Atlas argued, his gaze softening as he looked at her. Her fur was matted, her strength visibly waning. He felt a surge of helplessness, a bitter taste in his mouth. He had faced death so many times, but never with such a precious life depending on him. He had to keep her safe. Another thud, closer this time, then a low metallic click. "They're setting the detonators," Atlas realized, his voice grim. "We have minutes, maybe seconds." He looked around their small refuge. There was no obvious exit. Their initial escape route into this fissure was now blocked by the very collapse they caused. "There is always a way," Bellatrix murmured, her eyes distant as if seeing beyond the rock walls. "The oldest passages often have hidden branches, fault lines. Instability means opportunity." She pointed weakly with her free hand towards a faint, almost invisible seam in the rock at the back of the alcove, barely wider than her arm. "That fault line. It's ancient. Deep." Atlas squinted. It was a hairline fracture, barely perceptible. It might lead to nowhere, or worse, to another unstable section. "It is a chance," she insisted, her voice gaining a surprising edge of urgency. "A small one, but it is there. You must open it." He looked at her, then at the seam. His geological expertise told him it was a gamble of epic proportions, but her conviction was absolute. "How?" "The charges outside will create immense pressure. Use it. Find the weak point. Leverage the shockwave." Bellatrix's instruction was precise, despite her fading energy. "You know rock better than any of my kind." Atlas nodded, a plan forming, desperate and dangerous. He quickly scanned their limited tools. The heavy beam they had used earlier was still there. He grabbed it, dragging it towards the fault line. "You need to brace yourself, Bellatrix. This is going to be violent." He wedged the end of the beam into a small crevice near the fault, creating a fulcrum. He positioned himself, preparing to push, to ram, to unleash all his strength at the critical moment. His muscles screamed in protest from days of exertion and fear, but he ignored them. Bellatrix's life depended on it. A sudden, sharp crack echoed from outside, followed by a deeper, guttural rumble that shook the very foundations of their alcove. The air vibrated, dust exploded around them, and small chunks of rock broke free from the ceiling, bouncing harmlessly off Atlas's back. Now Bellatrix cried, her voice strained but clear. Atlas lunged forward, throwing his entire weight against the beam. He pushed with everything he had, guiding the pressure wave into the fault line. The rock screamed, a high-pitched grinding sound that tore through the chaos. He felt the beam give, heard a sickening crunch. The hairline fracture widened with a groan, then fragmented. A small section of the rock wall, no larger than a man, tore inward, revealing a dark, claustrophobic tunnel beyond. It was barely wide enough for one person to squeeze through and looked like a natural chimney chute, angling sharply downwards. It opened. Atlas gasped, pulling the beam free, his arms aching. He looked back at Bellatrix. She was slumped against the wall, her breathing shallow, but a faint, relieved smile touched her lips. "Go," she urged, pushing herself with immense effort. "I will follow." "No, you go first," Atlas insisted, knowing she would struggle through the narrow opening. "I'll make sure nothing collapses behind us." Another series of deep, shuddering rumbles threatened to bring down the entire chamber. The scavengers were definitely setting off more charges, or perhaps the initial blast had simply destabilized the deeper layers. Bellatrix didn't argue. She pushed herself upright, her body trembling, and began to force her injured form into the narrow opening. Her fur scraped against the rough rock, a soft rasping sound. She moved slowly, painfully, but with an iron will. Atlas watched her, his heart pounding, then turned back to the breached wall. He grabbed a few larger rocks, positioning them to create a slight funnel, hopping to direct any further collapse away from their escape route. He would be the last one through. He always would be. As Bellatrix disappeared into the darkness of the chute, a final, monstrous tremor ripped through the mountain. The alcove groaned, the ceiling cracking visibly above Atlas. He had no more time. He squeezed himself into the narrow opening, following Bellatrix into the suffocating darkness, leaving the collapsing chamber behind just as the roar of falling rock thundered in his ears. Their tenuous hope for rescue now lay entirely within the dark, unknown passages of the mountain's heart, with only each other to rely on. The darkness of the chute was absolute, a suffocating embrace that swallowed the roar of the collapsing alcove. Atlas felt the rock walls pressing in, the air thick with dust and the metallic scent of displaced earth. He crawled forward, hands scraping, knees bruising, following the faint sounds of Bellatrix's struggle ahead. Her labored breathing was his only guide in the pitch black. "Bellatrix," he rasped, his voice tight with exertion and fear. A soft whimper was her reply, muffled by the confined space. He knew she was in immense pain. His fingers brushed against her fur, warm and matted with dried blood. He pushed past his own discomfort, focusing only on her. The passage angled steeply downwards, a natural vent within the mountain's heart. They slid more than climbed, guided by gravity until the slope lessened. The air grew cooler, cleaner, carrying a faint, earthy smell. Atlas realized the tunnel was widening, opening into a larger space. He emerged first, tumbling onto a soft bed of fine, ancient dust. Bellatrix followed, her body heavy, collapsing beside him with a pained grunt. They lay there for a moment, catching their breath, the silence a welcome contrast to the mountain's recent fury. "Are you all right?" Atlas asked, his hand finding hers. Her grip was weak but present. "Better," she whispered, her voice hoarse. The pain, less with movement, stopped. He pushed himself up, surveying their new refuge. It was a vast, subterranean cavern unlike any they had encountered. The ceiling was high, lost in shadow, and strange, crystalline formations jutted from the walls, catching what little ambient light filtered down from unseen fissures above. It felt ancient, untouched. Suddenly, a distant, high-pitched whine filled the cavern. It was a familiar sound, mechanical and precise. Atlas's heart leaped. "The drone," he breathed. "The rescue ship." Bellatrix lifted her head, her violet eyes wide, reflecting the faint light. "They found us." A tremor of hope, fragile but real, passed between them. The whine grew louder, descending rapidly. A brilliant beam of light pierced the darkness from above, sweeping across the cavern floor. It illuminated them, two battered figures huddled in the dust, and then settled, a focused column of pure energy. A sleek, angular craft, unlike anything Atlas had ever seen, descended through a perfectly circular opening in the cavern ceiling. It was silver, silent, and radiated an aura of advanced technology. It hovered a few meters above them, its landing struts extending. A ramp lowered with a soft hiss. Two figures, tall and slender, with the same elegant, white fur and violet eyes as Bellatrix, descended. They wore form-fitting uniforms, and their movements were swift, efficient. They were Viridian. One of them, a female with an air of command, knelt beside Bellatrix, her expression concerned. She spoke in a rapid, melodic language, her hands moving with gentle urgency over Bellatrix's injuries. Bellatrix replied, a weak stream of words. The Viridian leader glanced at Atlas, her violet eyes assessing, then nodded in understanding. She issued a command to her companion, who quickly produced a medical scanner. "They are asking about your condition," Bellatrix translated, her voice gaining a little strength, "and for details of what happened." "Tell them we're alive," Atlas said, a relieved laugh bubbling up, "and that you saved my life more times than I can count." The Viridian medics worked quickly, administering a gel-like substance to Bellatrix's energy blast wound. Atlas watched, fascinated, as the angry crimson began to fade, the tissue knitting itself with impossible speed. Within minutes, Bellatrix's breathing normalized and some of the color returned to her face. The Viridian leader then offered Atlas a nutrient paste and water, her gaze softening. "She says you are a human of remarkable resilience," Bellatrix translated, a faint smile playing on her lips, "and that your quick thinking with the legacy code saved us all." "It was your quick thinking that got us into that passage," Atlas countered, returning her smile. They were carefully helped onto the ship. The interior was pristine, bathed in a soft, diffused light. Bellatrix was immediately taken to a medical bay, where advanced equipment whirred softly around her. Atlas was directed to a comfortable seating area, offered more food and drink, and given a comlink to speak with his own rescue contacts. Hours passed. Atlas spoke with his frantic team on Earth, assuring them of his safety, explaining the extraordinary circumstances in broad strokes. He felt a profound sense of relief, but also a strange emptiness. The desert, Kaelin, Bellatrix, they had become his world. Finally, a Viridian attendant led him to the medical bay. Bellatrix stood by a panoramic viewport, gazing out at the stars. She was fully healed, her fur gleaming, her posture regal. She turned as he entered, her violet eyes meeting his. "Atlas," she said, her voice clear and strong, "my kin are grateful. They wish to thank you for preserving my life, for activating the beacon, for everything." "I just did what anyone would do," he replied, walking towards her. "We saved each other." "True," she acknowledged. She paused, then continued, "My family, my people, they are ready to take me home to Viridian Prime. They offer you passage to Earth." Atlas felt a pang. This was it, the moment of parting. He had imagined it, feared it, longed for it in turns. He looked at the stars, then back at Bellatrix, his heart heavy. "I suppose this is goodbye, then." She stepped closer, her expression unreadable. "It does not have to be." Atlas blinked, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I spoke with my kin," she explained, her gaze intense. "They understand the bond we formed. They know of your knowledge of Kaelin, your desire to explore its mysteries. They also see the value in our alliance." "And," he prompted, a flicker of hope igniting within him. "Kaelin is still largely uncharted by Viridian standards," Bellatrix said, her hand reaching out, not quite touching his. "There is so much to learn, so much to discover. My people would like to establish a long-term research outpost here, a joint venture." Atlas understood. "And you would be part of that." She nodded, her violet eyes shining. "I would, as would you if you choose. We could explore Kaelin together, mapping its geology, understanding its life forms, preserving its delicate balance. Your skills, my knowledge of survival, we are a strong team, Atlas." The thought filled him with a warmth that spread through his entire being. To stay, to continue their journey, not as captives or rescuers, but as partners, exploring a new world together. The vastness of Kaelin, once a brutal antagonist, now beckoned with promise. "You would choose to stay on Kaelin with me?" he asked, needing to hear it plainly. "My home is where I feel most alive," Bellatrix said, her gaze unwavering. "And that is here with you, exploring the unknown." Her hand finally found his, her grip firm and warm. Atlas smiled, a wide, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Then our journey continues," he said, squeezing her hand, "to the heart of Kaelin and beyond." They stood together, looking out at the endless starfield, two beings from different worlds, forged into an unbreakable bond by fire and sand. The harsh beauty of Kaelin awaited them, a testament to their enduring alliance and the interstellar romance that had found its home in the most unexpected of places. Their future was not a return to the familiar, but a bold step into the vast, promising unknown, hand in paw, heart to heart.